Harris. Business news now with Brian Quinn. Always want to see Brian Quinn, though. He's coming down to the moment of truth for global trade as Donald Trump gets set to unveil reciprocal tariffs of US trading partners worldwide, Brian.
Stuart, the clock ticking, tensions running high as governments around the world brace for what Trump has been calling Liberation Day. On Wednesday, Washington is set to unveil a wide range of tariffs on imports from countries with whom the U.S. runs persistent trade imbalances. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has signaled that the tariffs are likely to target what he calls the dirty 15, the 15% of trading partners with whom the U.S. has the largest and longest trade deficits. That puts Asian countries squarely in the firing line. 9 of America's top 15 trade deficits are with Asian nations, nearly $300 billion with China last year, $123 billion with Vietnam, a $68 billion trade deficit with Japan. Speaking to reporters on board Air Force One on Sunday, Trump insisted that his next round of tariffs will include all countries and not just the dirty 15, though he did make sure to single out Asia. Here he is.
You would take a look at trade with Asia, and I wouldn't say anybody is treated as fairly or nicely, but we are going to treat them. We're going to be much more generous to them in terms of heart. We're going to be much more generous than they were to us.
Now, some of Asia's top economies are seeking to promote regional trade amid those fraying relations with the U.S.
So Japan, South Korea, and China held a summit of top-level trade officials on Sunday. That's the first of such meeting in 5 years. The 3 countries are Asia's top exporting powers, with the automobile industry particularly crucial to the Japanese and South Korean economies. Donald Trump has already announced 25% U.S. tariffs on all imported cars to take effect on Thursday. Trade ministers of those 3 countries called for the acceleration of a trilateral free trade agreement amongst them. Negotiations on such a deal have made little progress since kicking off in 2012. The deal faces political challenges, particularly between Japan and South Korea, which have been locked in a dispute over reparations for Japan's use of forced labor during its decades-long occupation of the Korean peninsula. Japan and China, meanwhile, have clashed over Japan's release of wastewater from the Fukushima nuclear disaster. The 3 nations are already part of RCEP. That's a 15-member free trade deal encompassing Asia's top economies. They called for strengthening RCEP as well as global trade arbiters like the WTO. Take a listen here.
The global environment surrounding us is changing day by day, and instability is growing. It is precisely because of this situation that the creation of rules based on the WTO and economic partnership agreements and the maintenance and strengthening of the rules-based international economic order are so important.
On to the markets then. How are they shaping up, Brian?
Seeing big sell-offs in Japan and South Korea on Monday, Stuart, as investors brace for those new incoming U.S. tariffs. Shares in Japanese tech investment giant SoftBank lost more than 5.5%, with Tokyo's Nikkei index off by more than 4%. New data shows South Korean retail sales figures hit a 6-month high in February. That not enough to offset that tariff risk, though, as the Kospi sank 3%. Here in Europe, all major indexes in the red at the open, with losses across most sectors. Only the utility sector managing to stay in positive territory as the DAX in Frankfurt drops nearly a full percent. The CAC 40 here in Paris not far behind it.
Yeah, lots of businesses to digest then as the week goes on. Finally for business, though, as Mexico has found itself at the target of Donald Trump's tariffs, the country is relaunching a decades-old campaign to bolster its domestic industries.
This Made in Mexico campaign was originally launched in the late 1970s to encourage Mexican consumers to buy local. It's being relaunched as Mexico's relationship with its top trading partner, the U.S., comes under increasing strain. But while Mexico exports much more to the U.S. than it imports, it's actually a net importer overall on a global scale, and the U.S. may not be the campaign's main target. Matthew Mary Carachet has more.
As U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threats loom over international markets, Mexico has relaunched its Made in Mexico campaign. Originally established in 1978, the campaign aims to promote products manufactured entirely in Mexico from domestically sourced materials.
We have to abandon the belief that things made in Mexico are of average quality. There are many good things produced in our country.
Obviously, with everything going on with the United States, the new tariffs, we are trying to consume more of what we have in Mexico.
According to the World Bank, Mexico is a net importer of goods in general, but in regards to its biggest trading partner, the United States, Mexico exports much more than it imports. Indeed, despite the current trade rifts with the Trump administration, the United States may not be the true target of Made in Mexico. The Mexican government had been planning to increase tariffs this year, even before Trump took office, looking to stop the flood of cheap consumer goods that originate in Asia, explicitly calling out China-based companies such as Temu, Shein, and AliExpress.
Every time we buy something, we need to think that if it says made in Mexico, it provides jobs in our country. And if not, it's somewhere else.
In January, Mexico imposed new 17 to 19% tariffs on all e-commerce goods entering the country, even from free trade agreement partners Canada and the United States, which were only exempt if the goods were less than $50 in value. This was before Trump threatened to impose 25% tariffs on Mexican products coming to the United States.
Plenty of trade uncertainty, and we'll be seeing more of that in the weeks to come, Stuart.
Thank you very much, Brian Quinn, with Business News. Lots to follow, as I say. Time for the